Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Friday. It's the weekend. We're going to get to do absolutely nothing because we can't go out, right? Well, not always. There's a lot of cruises going on. Santa Barbara State Street Cruise going to happen tonight. Not sanctioned, but it's going to happen. You'll be people out there cruising around, and I'm sure this car cruise is set up for this weekend. I know we're looking at a few. Haven't made any decisions about going out. It's up to you. We are going to go out. We're going to have some fun with our cars and enjoy the scenery and the great weather we've got right now. Danny Santos, how are you doing this morning? Cassie Nunez is watching as well. Welcome to the show this morning. Hey, we're going to talk about a car that got maligned pretty badly during the 1960s by the famous Ralph Nader. What's his fame for? Unsafe at Any Speed book, which it was accepted as documented fact by a guy who didn't even have a driver's license, wasn't an automotive engineer, and had no automotive background. Later on, we'll go into that. NHTSA tested the car and found it no more unsafe than anything else for the time. But let's start at the beginning. Back in the late 1950s and up to the late 1950s, most of the big three, that's Chrysler, Ford, and Chevrolet, or General Motors, produced large cars. You could get 3 or 4 different trim options, but you got the same basic body style. Well, that started to change. Studebaker and Rambler, AMC, Nash came out with compact cars. Studebaker's Lark. Rambler had the American and the little bitty Metro. So these were compact cars, and the import invasion began. Volkswagen, now the economy invasion. Sports cars were already coming into the country beginning in the late 1940s from Britain and Italy. But 1950 started bringing in the compact cars. Nissan, Toyota, actually Datsun at the time. Volkswagen. Those cars were coming in. Those were compact economy cars that the everyday buyer could drive. Economical, inexpensive to buy, good, reliable transportation. Well, the domestic market said, we better look at this. So Chrysler, Ford, and Chevrolet, or General Motors, came out with a series of small cars. Chevrolet came out with the Corvair. Totally radical, different from anything on the road made in America. It had fully independent front and rear suspension, a swing axle style similar to what you can find on a Mercedes, Porsche, or Volkswagen. It had a flat 6-cylinder air-cooled aluminum engine. Well, the cylinders were cast iron, but the heads, the block, I believe those were all aluminum. And someone will correct me, I'm sure, if I'm wrong on that one. The base horsepower was 80. It was air-cooled. You didn't have the cooling system to worry about. It had one fan belt that kind of went screwy up and then across the top of the engine. How many Pintos have you ever seen wrecking yards with blown-up gas tanks? Yeah, I know, John. And we'll go into that, too, sometime. Ellen Fox, welcome back. You've been gone for a long time. Nice to see you here again. All right, so the Corvair came out. Flat floor. Big trunk in the front. It had amazing handling for the time. Now, when they first came out, one of the issues they had, and people complained, was the handling. It was different from what they were used to. It had a swing axle in the rear. You went into a turn too hard, and they would tend to go inward like this. Now, Chevrolet did drop the front sway bar from that car on the initial introduction of the car. An engineer said, no, we got to keep that on there to make it handle. Chevrolet said, we're saving a couple of bucks here, we're going to take it off. It ended up getting put back on. And in later production, they ended up putting limiter straps on the axles in the rear to keep them from tucking on turns. Now, Tom McCahall, a very well-known and respected automotive journalist at the time, took one of the Corvairs with the swing axle and tried to duplicate what Ralph Nader was accusing the car of, and that was flipping over, rolling over, and being unsafe at any speed. Well, McCahall tried, and he was a good driver, was a test driver, did a lot of writing for Mechanics Illustrated and others. He was an automotive authority. The best he could do was get it to slide. Yes, Kyle Yenko did some modified Corvairs. As a matter of fact, that's where Yenko got their start, modifying Corvairs, the Yenko Stinger. Now, the other modified Corvair was John Finch. He was a race driver and a very knowledgeable engineer. As a matter of fact, those crash barriers you see on the freeways with water-filled barrels? That was John Finch's idea. The Corsa was a great car, and there is a club called Corsa, the Corvair Owners Group. Yep. As a matter of fact, I've seen them in a lot of autocrosses. When I was an autocross enthusiast and I raced a lot, we had a lot of them there. Rafael Noriega from Italy. The Corvair has been largely misunderstood. It has, and it is a poor man's Porsche, as some of the magazines refer to it. So the first generation Corvairs came out. They were quirky. Trust me, they were quirky. 3-speed manual transmission was standard. 2-speed automatic was the option. No 4-speed yet. When they first came out, you had a 4-door sedan and a 2-door coupe. A wagon came out shortly thereafter. Then they started upgrading the models. They had different levels of trim. The base model 500 series, then there was the higher level. They had the Corvair wagon, and I think those are cool. The Lakewood wagons, when they first came out. 4-door wagon, neat. Saw one at an auction, sold for $12,000. Was really, really tight and nice, though. But the wagon never got the performance options that the coupes got. And the coupe didn't come out initially. So when it did come out, sales started to skyrocket. Now, Ed Cole was responsible for the Corvair development at General Motors, and he had been with GM for quite some time, was responsible for the production or the introduction of the V8 small block that we're used to seeing from General Motors or Chevrolet, and a number of other things. But they needed something to go up against the import invasion, and they knew Chrysler was coming out with the Valiant and the Lancer. Ford was coming out with the Falcon and the Mercury Comet. They had to do something, and their idea was totally different from what the competition was doing. The competition was basically making shrunk full-size cars. Front engine, rear drive, standard operation. But that is what Americans were used to, and they wanted to make the safe bet. Corvair, totally unsafe bet. Not an unsafe car, unsafe bet. And they came out with a fully independent suspension, rear engine, rear wheel drive car. It sold well. 200,000 plus units the first year. And in the first year, they didn't have all the models released at the same time. And it wasn't until later on they got the coupe and the 4-speed. Then they started increasing the model proliferation and started adding options. Heavier suspensions, bigger brakes, front sway bars, rear axle limiters, air conditioning, 4 carburetor engines, and the Corvair was only the second American production car to get turbocharging. That's right. Chrysler didn't have it. Ford didn't have it. GM had it on the 62 Olds Cutlass with the 215 cubic inch V8. Corvair got it on the little 6-cylinder, and it made it a performance vehicle. John Finch and guys at Yenko, they saw it, and they started jumping on it, and they made some interesting cars. Finch cars now can sell anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 in bad shape. In good shape, who knows where they're going to go. All right, so great cars. The Corvair came out. First generation cars, 1960 through 1964. Some minor trim changes, bucket seats, better suspensions. They were okay. They were cool. Last part of the 64 model year, they went to a different type of steering column. And that was part of the unsafe at any speed issue, is the Corvair being a unit body construction, the first from General Motors, had a solid steering column, like everything else did back in those days. But because of the unibody construction, the car would crush a little bit more. And crushing Absorbing that energy of an accident was actually better for the occupants. However, the steering column became a projectile. So GM put a universal joint in there so that it would not come back at the driver. In mid to late 1964. It was the standard equipment by 65 on the totally redesigned Corvair. Now, I say totally redesigned because the suspension now is different. Now, with the new generation of Corvairs, the suspension started to model more like the Corvette. Excuse me one second. Now, one of the other things they added along the way, they changed spring rates. They added a transverse leaf spring in the back, and that was to aid in handling. They had a heavy-duty suspension option. They ended up coming out with Chevelle brakes on the Corvairs to make them stop even better. That's right, Cassie. 1965 Corvairs got the same brakes that you could find on a Chevelle. Why would Yenko upgrade the Corvair when there were more muscle-like cars out there? Not yet. Corvair was out before the Camaro. And Yenko started with the Corvair. They saw the potential. Same thing with John Finch. They saw the potential of the little car. You got to remember, the Chevelle didn't come out until 1964. And that wasn't a performance car at that point in time. All right, so moving on. In 1966, or 65, the totally redesigned Corvair came out. Now, you got to remember, they also had, in the first generation Corvairs, the ramp side pickup truck, the van, the commercial van, no windows, the window van, the Greenbrier, and four-door station wagon, two-door, and they were all sedans. Second generation, now you've got four-door hardtops. No more wagons. Pickup trucks are getting eliminated. So is the van. They went back to a conventional style van, front engine, rear wheel drive. All right, so Corvair, a hit. 200 to 300,000 units sold a year until Ralph Nader's book came out. The problem was, when Ralph Nader's book came out, all the changes he was looking for or complaining about had already been changed. And that was where it was. So Corvair was improved. It was better. It was a cool car. One of our friends in our Corvette club, he loves driving his Corvair, and he does it. Rich and Vanita were out at the cruise this weekend with their second generation Corvair, and it is beautiful. Bright red, nice machine. As a matter of fact, I'd kind of like to get a Corvair sometime. I mean, add it to the stable. They're small. They're compact. Good horsepower to weight ratio. Now let's take a look at some of that. And when they first came out, they had an 80 horsepower engine, and they were pretty peppy. But by late 1963, they wanted to get a little bit more economy out of them, so they put in a lower or a taller gear ratio of 3.8, 08 to 1. So they tried to get more mileage out of them. They weren't the best on mileage, but they were still good. Six-cylinder engine, base horsepower, 80 horsepower, single carburetor on each side of the engine. You got to remember. And Cassie says, Cassie, Chevelle said didn't handle as good as a Corvair on the road. You know, Chevelle didn't handle it all, Cassie. They were not made for making turns. Corvair did. All right, so where'd they go? Well, they increased the engine size from the original 145 to 140. Well, actually, 140 was the first one. They went to 145, then 164 cubic inches. They're still small, but you got to look at what the competition was putting out at that point. Chrysler had a 170 cubic inch 6 and a 225 cubic inch 6. Inline 6s, still front engine, rear drive, more torque, more horsepower in some cases. Ford had a 144 cubic inch 6, a 170, and then later came out with a 200 inch 6. Chevrolet saw the writing on the wall, though, and as sales were dropping on the Corvair and the issues were appearing, they came out and started working on the Nova. The Nova was a direct competitor for the Falcon, the Valiant, the Dodge Lancer, and the Dodge Lancer was the compact before the Dodge Dart. So that was the change there. So Nova started coming out in 1962. The real hit to Corvair came in 1964 with the introduction of the Mustang. Yeah, Mustang stole sales. Same price range, more sporty and conventional car. Let's see what Carl Abbott has to say here. The van was great. Grocery getter. Yeah, it was. His first job was delivering groceries for a small store, and he did it in that. And it was great for the side loading of beer. Okay, Carl. And they had that side ramp on the pickup trucks, which made it easy to roll things into the bed of the truck. Now, the problem with the truck, though, is the floor wasn't fully flat. The center section was flat, but the back section was raised up about a foot to clear the engine that was in the rear. Michael the Doctor, how are you doing here? So welcome. All right, so horsepower went to 150 on the Spider. Now, the Spider was the turbocharged vehicle initially. Later on, you could get a Spider without turbocharging, I'm told. Never saw one without turbo. All the Spiders I saw were turbocharged. The last year of the Corvair was 1969. And by then, all of the bugs and issues that anyone could ever think about had been worked out. They got rid of the gasoline heater by the end of the first generation Corvairs. Yes, gasoline heater. They did have a heating system that took hot air off the cylinders. But in cold areas, people wanted more. So they had a gasoline heater in the trunk that actually used gasoline fired like a little burner in your house. Fuel mileage suffered tremendously, and that was the downside, or one of the downsides, of the gasoline heater in the car. Chris Rogers says, my 80 horsepower 60 Corvair 3-speed, got a lot of comments here, will smoke the 63 Falcon's 170. Yeah, it was a lighter car. It was a lighter car, and the gearing was better for the first generation Corvairs. All right, so David Hoover, Hayes, Cassie Nunez's Mustang, wrecking sales for a lot of cars. Yes, Mustang was a big hit, and it was definitely cool. Marco, Spider was only turbo, no Spider. According to the information that I'm reading, there was a Spider that was non-turbo, and it was 150 horsepower rather than the 180. But that was second generations, guys. Let me find that again. Hang in there. Don't go anywhere. You're not going anywhere, are you? Okay. Hi, Marcy. How you doing? And Kyle says, what was the Corvair, Monza, and Corsa? I did miss it. Well, the Monza was the mid-range. The Corsa was the performance edition of the Corvair. So the top-of-the-line non-turbo cars or non-performance cars were Monzas. And Monzas, actually, over half of the Corvairs made were Monzas. Doug Thorley, 67 Nationals at Indy, won in a Corvair. A funny car, though. So about the only thing that was Corvair was the style of the body. All right, so let's find out here about that Spider without turbocharging. All right, like I said, the Monza Coupe, 151,000 produced out of the 292 Corvairs produced for 1962. John Finch chose the Corvair as the base for his Sprint models then. So again, this is before the Chevelles, Cassie. The Corvair was known for its better handling. Now, he came out with the Sprint version, installed the Sprint conversion, and dealers could sell the car. Marco, Spider, 150 horsepower, 65 to 66 turbo cars. The Corsa was 180 horsepower. There were 140 horsepower Corsas, and those were the 4 carburetor ones that I was talking about. Non-turbocharged, 4 carb. All right, so heavy-duty suspensions were no longer optional. That was just part of it. Front anti-roll bars were standard in the first generation towards the end, and the fin brake drums. So 1963 saw some major changes. Unfortunately, Corvair sales dropped to 80,000 units. And basically, it was the body style. The mechanicals were not the issue at that point. It was the body style had been the same since late 1959 when they were introduced as 1960 models. So the second generation came out for 1965. It was introduced in late 1964, and it was an immediate hit. Car and Driver magazine raved over the car. They couldn't stop driving it enough. They enjoyed it. They loved the styling. They still thought it needed more horsepower. 180 horsepower turbocharged engine was the option on the Corsa, which either had a standard 3-speed or 4-speed transmission. And like they're saying, there was a 140 horsepower version of the Monza N500. There was also a Corsa standard. Let's see, the 65 had the Corsa dashboard standard, featuring a 140 horse or mile per hour speedometer. They fixed the steering column issues. They had the all-weather air conditioning now available, telescopic adjustable steering wheel, a Z17 handling package, special performance suspension, quick ratio steering box. These were significant options for 1965, and this was to combat the popularity of the Mustang. They thought their competition was the Mustang. Mustang owners didn't think that way. Good morning, Jeff. Evening in the United Kingdom. Yeah, and it's early morning here, but you can sit back, have a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and listen to me babble. The 66 lineup for the Corvair was basically unchanged from 65, although they did change the first gear and the 3-speed manual transmission, which really wasn't that popular an option. Hi, Ron. Did not like it or the VW. Don't forget the Rambler American. Yeah, it was. That was one of the reasons they came out with the Corvair, and why the domestic other manufacturers started looking at compact cars, because the Rambler American was getting attention. As a matter of fact, during the 1950s, when the Rambler American was first introduced to replace the little small Nash, Rambler, or AMC, became the number 3 manufacturer for 1 year anyway, as people gravitated to the more economical small cars. Cassie says, could you cramp a big block inside a Corvair, like a 396 or something? Yeah, that would be a monster, and it's actually a problem. Too much weight, not enough car. Now, there was an automotive kit called the Crown Kit, which put a subframe in the back of the Corvair, flipped the transaxle over, and you put a V8 small block midship. The big block, too big, too heavy to make it really feasible. Fast Eddie had a Corvair Corsa, a Corvair van with 4 carbs. Yep, that was a good little piece. Denny Sanders talking about the Olds 425s with a Tornado transaxle. Yeah, that was a popular swap. That was a whole chassis swap, and that was originally designed for people to use in kit cars. And it was a 425 cubic inch Olds mounted sideways, because you got to remember, or actually longitudinal, but because of the Olds Tornado setup, and the Cadillac also used that same front drive setup, it was more compact than the Corvair transaxle with a small block V8. And I'm trying to remember who came up with that kit, and it eludes me right now. All right, Phil Hoffman's still with us. And he said, yeah, I did it in high school auto shop. Put an engine swap in. All right, so Corvairs are still popular. They're still great. There's a car club here in Southern California called Corsa, Corvair Owners Club. And let me find that here. They've also got a forum. It's CorvairCenter.com. They've got a forum for Corvair owners and enthusiasts that you can tune into. So CorvairCenter.com is the forum. And the car club, Corsa West, has a great following of people, and they make some Corvairs move like mad. I've watched them. There's a guy that I used to love watching. He had an orange Corvair with the roof cut off. That thing sat super low, had excellent handling, and he would shut down the Corvettes on a regular basis. So Corvair, a lot of hot air, but it was a pretty darn good car. Love to have one someday. It's on my bucket list. A Corsa, actually a Spider, turbocharged, 2nd generation. That would be the one I'd want. Which Corvair would you guys like? I'm Hot Rod Bob. You've got gas, the morning edition. And Alan's talking about the Corvette Owners Group on Facebook, another place to get your Corvair information. I'm Hot Rod Bob. You've got gas, the morning edition. Thanks for tuning in. Glad you could make it. And Alan says there's South Coast Corvair. Alan, are you a member of these car clubs, of the Corvair clubs? Let us know. Nettie's there. Corsa, South Coast Corsa Car Club on Facebook as well. All right, a lot of sources for Corvette information. All right, you've got gas, the morning edition, brought to you by BUA, Beach Underwriting Associates, Irwindale Speedway, Irwindale Drag Strip, Moon Eyes, Service Tech for all your garage needs, Valley Head Service, They'll build it if you've got it. That's right. Any engine. They did my 292 in my Ford, and they'll do yours too. Just saw them working on a Gurney Westlake 3-valve V8 head. Amazing. Roseanne Hernandez, how are you doing today? Glad you could be here with us. All right, guys, you have a great day. I'm Hot Rod Bob. It's Friday. Post where you're going this weekend, what you're doing car-wise. Put it on my page. We'll share it with everybody. You have a great day. I'm Hot Rod Bob. You've got gas. Please share and like GAAS, the Great American Auto Scene, and Two Tired Guys, the production company with Randy Cardoon, Rapid Randy, with talking about cars, and me, I'm the one with GAAS, the Great American Auto Scene. You have a great day and a great weekend. We'll talk to you again Monday.